There is a stigma that has long run rampant on UCSD's reputation that has gone well beyond meme status. The socially dead moniker has become so widespread, it has practically become the very identity of UCSD's social life.
In general, respectfully, it's like a little bit more socially dead than other UC campuses.
If you don't put yourself out there, you're definitely going to be in your room alone.
No, there's no big events like parties that people think is like the quote-unquote social life.
Compared to other schools,
Yeah, it's pretty dead, I can't lie to you. Honestly, it's a little bit more exciting than like elderly people playing bingo.
Many people have voiced their cries over this phenomenon, and on top of their rigorous studies, extracurricular commitments, and personal responsibilities, among others, an empty social life is one of many factors that can weigh on a UCSD student's stress and mental well-being. Not to mention, you'll rarely find a day where someone isn't complaining about something they are being irritated by, or hoping to share the pain and sorrow after a particularly bad exam with others in their class. With the endless amount of these posts throughout the past several years, perhaps this is a sign that stress levels of those attending UCSD are higher compared to their peers in other universities and their mental health is disproportionately in shambles. Or is it? Is there truly a difference between mental well-being in UCSD students compared to the average among all students in the UC system and the nationwide average? That's what our group sought to answer in our project. Starting out, we hypothesized that students in UCSD are more likely to report levels of mental distress that are at or above the average of students in peer institutions. We also have to acknowledge that responses can vary due to factors such as one's own awareness of symptoms, their willingness to disclose their feelings, and their access to their university's mental health resources. In order to get a definitive answer to our question, we need to find data of university student stress levels and mental health standing among those attending UCSD, the other colleges in the UC system, and other select universities nationwide in order to give ourselves comparable metrics we can use to assess the relationship between student mental distress and their school of attendance. Luckily, there are many resources available that sought to measure these metrics. The first dataset we looked at is the Healthy Mind Study, which is a wide-scale survey that covers colleges and universities throughout the United States that include measurements on standardized mental health screening instruments, tracks demographic characteristics, and information of prior use of mental health counseling. For our second source, we analyzed a dataset from the National College Health Assessment, which includes standardized measures of student mental health within several factors related to psychological distress and physical health behaviors like physical activity, BMI, food security, and mental health service utilization. And for our third source, we analyzed a dataset of a survey among student responses across all University of California campuses in regards to their anxiety, depression, and stress levels, and whether those issues have had a negative effect on their academic performance. Now that we have the data we need, our goal is to compare the findings between schools in each of these datasets. If there is a significant difference in average mental health sentiment between certain schools compared to the averages, it could be an indication of certain universities having a questionable mental health climate. We can also use these datasets to determine whether mental distress has a correlation to specific characteristics. So, what does the data say and what are the significant findings? After analyzing the data from these sources, we observed that most students say they experience low to moderate levels of stress, with the resilience being in the moderate to high range. On the other hand, reported levels of loneliness among students are much more varied. We can see that most students have a loneliness score of a 4, but there are also a sizable portion of students at a 7 or 8, with all other scores being much more uncommon. We can see that psychological well-being scores follow a standard pattern, with most students scoring in the moderately high range without much deviation. The same can be said about students' resilience scores, with most scores being in the moderately high range. However, the loneliness score is the only metric that does not follow this predictable trend and is much more inconsistent. And without much of a correlation between the measured characteristics and the reports of higher loneliness, this indicates that mental health outcomes likely hinge on more personalized characteristics unique to each individual student. Thus, we conclude mental health outcomes among UCSD students are not significantly different compared to students in other universities. Rather, a student's mental well-being varies depending on each individual rather than the metrics listed in the datasets. In other words, it's not a student's university of attendance that dictates their mental standing, but it is the series of differences between each person that plays the biggest role on their well-being. So next time we see a post ragging on how this campus social life is non-existent, complaining about a certain class or professor, or even feeling like everything is collapsing after some bad grades, maybe we just caught someone on a bad day. And with our newfound insights, perhaps we can realize we're all not so different.